All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Bill and Jeff Rhodes with Crossroads Consulting with another XR Insight interview. This morning we have Brandon Miller of Navigator Risk. Good morning, Brandon.
Morning. How are you guys?
Doing good after a Super Bowl evening.
Yep.
I couldn't make it through the whole game. I was pulling for the Chiefs, although I'm happy for the Eagles. So, I didn't lose any sleep over it other than I ate too much, had heartburn, and had a miserable night's sleep.
All right. Well, I had to take my wife's phone away because she was watching the Puppy Bowl. And every time we do that, we end up with another animal. So, I have to monitor. I have to monitor her application status on all these adoption websites.
Funny.
I can relate. So, well, again, thanks for joining us. And let's just kind of jump right in here. And just who is Navigator Risk? What do you guys do?
So Navigator Risk is a third-party risk management firm. So we do everything but sell the insurance. So everything we focus on, we put a plan together for all the factors that are driving a specific company's insurance premiums up. We put an action plan together around those specific factors to try to drive the premium down. We do that through process, procedure, applying a team. It's basically a turnkey. Rather than hire a risk manager and pay them $100 and change, whatever you got to pay them, you'll hire our team for a fee, which is based on the scope of the work, and you basically get a whole risk management team that becomes your partner in the trenches.
And when you're talking about insurance premium, what types of insurances are we looking at here?
So mainly, in certain states, workers' comp is a driver for like New York, New Jersey, not such a huge problem in states like Florida. But there are other issues where we come in. But as far as, let's take workers' comp, for example, the states where like New York, where that's such a huge problem, we have a whole program that we put together for that. As far as general liability claims, we handle all sorts of general liability claims. When you start to get into D&O stuff, like directors, officers, and some of the legal stuff that comes in, we really defer to, we're not in-house counsel, but we have counsel that works for the insurance carrier. So basically any line of insurance that you're going to have claims and risk, general liability and workers' comp being the biggest. You don't see too many of the other claims come in as much. And when they do come in, there's usually a set, procedure that has to happen with them. But with claims like GL and workers' comp, they could go off in all different directions, and you end up spending all kinds of money without even realizing it.
So You guys are not the ones who are selling the policies. Is that right?
You're right. Yeah, we're just the. There's a couple things that we're not. We're not insurance brokers. I'm not a premium recovery guy. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of what premium recovery people do. Those are guys that basically you hire them. They can go into your EMR. They start moving your class codes around. They're a good service. I mean, they have their benefits. And then they go to the state and they get you back credits, but they take 50% of whatever you get back. So if you get $200,000 back, they get $100,000. So we're not those guys. Our fee is based on the scope of the work. It's a flat fee. Whatever you get back in credits, you get to keep. And we're definitely not insurance consultants, which are guys that, I have a hard time because I've met so many of them, and so many of them say they do so many different things. And at the end of the day, a lot of them are just hired to buy the policy for the companies. They basically, the company wants their insurance policy bought. They hire these guys, they review everything, and they get a piece of the premium. And it really, to me, is like, one, your broker should be doing that. You shouldn't have to hire somebody else to do that. And two, you really should have somebody on your team that understands what's going on with the insurance, because you don't know what you don't know. So, so we're not brokers, we're not premium recovery people, and we're not insurance consultants. We're a strictly solution-oriented risk management firm.
So that brings up an interesting point when you talk about the evolution of insurance and the focus on overhead, reducing costs internally. Even the firms, the agencies themselves are focused on being more efficient, expanding their margins. Are you finding that even with carriers, they're not as aggressive as they could be on claims management? And is that kind of the niche that you guys have now occupied?
So that's a really that's a good question. So I'm going to say I got into this risk management thing in 2014. That's when I started kind of screwing around with the consulting side of things and really finding, you know, how much impact that has. So before that, like let's say 20 years ago, the insurance carriers used to handle a lot of this stuff that comes along. They used to handle the claims. They used to handle, you know, they'd assign people and they'd get stuff closed out. Bing, bang, boom, you're out the door. What they realized was they could make more money just by surcharging people on the reserves. And they stopped all that help and they put the onus of handling the claim onto you, and it's your problem to handle. And if you don't handle it, we're just going to charge you not to handle it, or we're going to drop you. So, you know, at the end of the day, these guys are businesses. That's what they're going to do. So,
okay. So where did the idea of Navigator Risk come from? I mean, obviously there were some problems with this, but how did the founder come up with knowing that he wanted to start this company?
So my partner, Alex, and I, who I hope you guys get to meet, we worked together at the same brokerage. He was a producer like me. We had the same position, but he was farther along in the game than I was. And he was a much better rounded in the construction market. I was a complete and utter like mess when I got there, because it was just like drinking through a fire hose trying to understand the construction market at first. And, you know, truth be told, I struggled heavily. And he, being the top sales guy, you know, he went on me with all my deals, all my meetings, and we created a really close bond. And we just, you know, I call it trauma bonding, because there was a lot of headache in that process. So we were doing the you know, bidding and quoting on the insurance like every other broker does, and then we were doing this kind of side consulting piece that, you know, we dabbled in, and we realized that we were able to have more constructive conversation around what to do, how to do it. The problem was when you're an insurance broker and you do all these great things on the side, people don't see you past an insurance broker. So a lot of brokers, you know, I don't want to put every broker in the same box, because there's a ton of good brokers out there. So I don't want to, you know, kind of smash the brokerage, you know, world to pieces. But a lot of brokers do the same thing. You bid and you quote the insurance.
All right.
You fill out the same applications. You have access to the same carriers that everybody else does. You have you know, I've been in these meetings with brokers. You know, I used to do them. So we have a dedicated staff. We have a claim staff. You're going to have your own person. We have all A-rated carriers. You know, we have a 24-hour hotline that, you know, helps out this and that and third. And it's really hard to differentiate yourself from the broker down the road. So what we ended up doing was just kind of focusing in on this consulting piece. And, you know, the fees for that were large enough to where it was a viable business. And I ended up leaving that company and going elsewhere. My partner left and started Navigator, and called me back into the fray. So that's how the genesis of that started.
Very nice. The American dream, right?
Yeah. Did I lose you guys for a second?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Hey, so you mentioned the EMR, experience modification rating. You mentioned reserves. These are things that impact the premium that companies pay. First off, tell me the size of the companies that you typically work with, and then let's talk a little bit about the EMR and the reserves. Yeah. Unless I'm jumping ahead here.
No, that's fine. Because a lot of people don't know what the EMRs are, so I think it's a good conversation to have. As far as the size of the companies we work with, I would say it's kind of hard to determine what size we work with. I mean, we work with companies of all different sizes. I do consulting for companies that are, you know, paying less than $100,000 in premium, and we do consulting for companies that are paying, you know, $4.5 million, $5 million and up in premium. So it's really a function of what the problem is, what the concerns are, and if the juice is going to be worth the squeeze. So, you know, I can walk you through our process. You know, I mean, we can get into the process, you know, after we're done with the EMR and stuff, but
sure,
it's really, before we take on a client, we really have to understand the scope of the problem, and it's got to be worth it to them. I mean, if you're going to come out net negative zero at the end of it. You spent all the money you would have otherwise not had to spend on premium, but you spent it on me. It's kind of hard to justify, bringing me on to do all this, different stuff. So we like to make sure that there's a problem we can tackle, and then put together a scope, what it would be like. And then, really it's up to the client to make a decision. We lay it all out for them.
So the EMR and then the reserves, where do you see the problems with traditional insurance in that regard?
So the EMR is something that people don't really understand. They know what it means. They know it has a direct impact on their workers' comp. But if you speak to a lot of brokers, there are brokers that say, well, the EMR is the EMR. I mean, that's at least the brokers I used to work for would say that. When I saw an EMR, my head was like, that's what it is, what it is. There's nothing you can do about it. But the EMR is a function of your payroll dollars versus your claims dollars. It's a ratio. And so the more positive payroll dollars you have, the more impact it's going to have on the negative claims dollars. A lot of people, their EMR goes up because they drop payroll or they move payroll into another LLC. And then what ends up happening is there's no more payroll dollars to absorb the bad claims dollars, and your EMR skyrockets. So, sorry, the bug just flew in my mouth. My apologies.
Protein.
Yeah. And I see the problem is just a misunderstanding of you don't know what you don't know. And people don't understand that when the moment the reserves hit your EMR, you're going to get surcharged even if you never pay them out.
So how are the reserves set? The carrier obviously establishes the reserves, but
yeah.
The experience modification rating includes the reserve amount, and the reserve amount can be thousands and thousands.
Whatever they want. They have some math that they do. I wouldn't want to say what it is or how it is, aside from them throwing a dart at the wall sometimes. But, one of the things that we do is we hold the carrier accountable we back them into that math, because nobody's doing it. The carrier is going to set reserves and they're going to move on to the next claim. They're going to set a reserve, move on, set a reserve, move on. You got to go back and walk and have them walk you through. Hey, where did you guys come up with this number? Where is it? I know it's a back injury, that you guys put $1 million reserve on it, but where's the math that backs that up? And then the carrier will come back to the table and you can negotiate a different level. I mean, the adjusters are just people at the end of the day. And nobody's holding their feet to the fire on stuff. So when you have somebody that's like a badger and wrapped around their ankle about how to figure out what these reserves are, they're going to move a little bit.
Right.
So can you go into a little bit more of a detail on how you guys work with the carriers on the reserve? Because that's a huge factor when it comes to your experience mod rating.
So we have a team of claims adjusters. They're headed up by our wonderful head adjuster, Marlo. She's fantastic. Marlo, the adjusters we have on staff used to work for the carriers. So we hire from the carriers, so they know how that system works. Marlo used to work for, she used to work for Arch. She used to work, there's a few different carriers she used to work for. So they understand that process and what that looks like. So they know essentially how to diary it, how to turn around, and, basically it's an art really to hold the carriers accountable. And a big carrier that sets reserves, it's like monopoly money, is a New York State Insurance Fund. I mean, they take incompetence to an art level with what they do. It's out of control where they come up with that. And that's kind of, I don't want to say it's one of the easiest ones to get the reserves down, but all you basically have to do is just poke them and they're like, oh yeah, sorry. Like we'll change. Like because it's not real money to them. They can set any reserve they want. It's state funded. It's, you're getting hammered either way. So unless nobody's pushing back, there's no advocate at the state fund that's going to turn around and help you. I mean, that's a state-run agency. So,
and the business owners, man, they don't have the resources, they don't have the time, they don't have the knowledge, the skill to deal with carriers. And the agents are all about business development to a big extent. So
yeah, and it's not an indictment on the agents. I mean, I've done that job, so I know what it takes to put some of these policies together. And it's a nightmare. I mean, it'll take up every ounce of energy. I'm sure you guys have done it, where you put together a submission and it's like a nightmare. So exactly. The brokers don't have the resources to do it. Some brokers, like the big houses, USI, Marsh McLennan, they have risk management services. but you have to be a sizable account for them to deploy that, because they have to be making a considerable amount of money to turn around and send out people to do that job. So I can't say they don't have it, but you got to be paying 5-10 million and above for them to even deploy their risk management team.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the big problems is when we deal with people that have Marsh McLennan. Oh, our broker has those capabilities. They have a risk management department. It's like, well, yeah, but they're not giving you access to that. They have it, but they're not allowing you to do it because they're not making enough money off you to justify it. So that's that's one of the pushbacks we always get.
Yeah.
One other thought that I have on the EMR and the reserves is the type of claim, the type of injury, and obviously the soft tissue injuries are the ones that are hardest to project the reserve amounts, project the finalization of that claim. Yep. Neck, back, shoulder, knee. Those are hard to deal with, and sometimes they're contagious in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are your experiences on dealing with these soft tissue injuries?
So there's certain things like back claims are probably the trickiest, because you don't know where back claims going to go. I mean, the other thing about claims is, I'll just jump into this real quick. I used to work with a limo company out of Westchester. They hired a guy that spent 30 years doing masonry work. 30 years tearing his back to pieces. He was hired on that company. I think the first trip or the first day, he pulled somebody's suitcase out of the trunk and his back blew out. $500,000 reserve. So a lot of things people don't understand is when you hire somebody, you own their entire medical history. It doesn't matter if it happened original, whatever, you own it. It happened on your job site in the course of doing work for your company. So as far as back claims go and soft tissue claims, it really is like a mixed bag. I mean, there's an algorithm that the carriers use to get there with certain things, but it really is just, the magic of it is holding the carriers accountable to what they're setting the reserve for. And that's where I think the big piece of the problem is, and why it's so tricky is because nobody is asking the carrier, well, wait a minute, where does this number come from? Can you back me into this number? And there's asking the question, and then there's doing it in a way that's meaningful and tactful. And that's where I think a lot of people miss the mark.
You bring up this back claim issue. I just received a call on Thursday from one of our clients that, has a sales guy and was moving a piece of their product that was in the front office and threw out his back. And, they're being dropped with that small company, not the main company that we have. So I'm trying to find them a solution because, like you mentioned, it was 3 people on payroll. Their workers' comp premium was probably, $1,500 a year. And now here's this $50,000 back claim initially.
Yeah.
So the carrier is like, your ratio is too high. We're not going to renew you. Yeah.
And the other thing, can I just touch on reserves on something? The other thing with reserves is, we get into some companies and they have, we've been talking to a nonprofit that we've analyzed their claims, a few times. Their loss runs are 63 pages worth of loss. So they have 2,800 employees. There's a new claim every day. They work in the autism space. So there's a lot of bite claims. There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff like that. And what we find in doing that is that when you analyze your EMR, a lot of brokers focus on the heavy hitting claims, the claims 50,000 and above. And what ends up happening is when we analyze your mod and your EMR, it's a mod and EMR, it's what we call it. Your EMR could be comprised of the cluster of claims that is, 10,000 and below, 15,000 and below. And nobody's tackling those claims. And that's actually where the meat of your EMR is. In some cases, I'm not saying for everybody, but in some cases, I mean, you have big claims that do drive your EMR through the roof. But a lot of times you can, and a lot of those claims, when you have loss runs that are that big and you have a lot of claims, sometimes the claim will be closed and the adjuster just didn't close it out the reserve to zero. They just left it on there and you're still getting surcharged. So there's low hanging fruit that people know about and how to handle that that sometimes it takes more than a simple phone call just to close a claim out. And then if that claim's been closed out on a date that's been in the past, you can retroactive that in some ways.
Gosh, that's interesting. So the frequency, if you have a high frequency of small claims, that could ultimately lead to a larger claim. At least that's what the carriers think.
Yep.
If you got a frequency problem, sooner or later you're going to have some large claims. But it's that combination, and it almost sounds like the frequency could be more impactful than a single large claim.
Yeah, it's not. It's really just how they're looking at it. I mean, you can have a bunch of large claims and your premium goes through the roof, and then a couple little ones and no big deal. But a lot of times when you start having a cluster of claims, they start. There's something called a split point. And the split point is, at least in New York State, is how they do it. And I keep referring back to New York State because that's where a lot of the meat is for tackling these workers' comp issues. So in New York State, for example, they have a split point, which is how they weigh your claim. Sorry about that. Let's turn my ringer off here. Which is how they weigh your claim. And it used to be, they say the first 1,000 of your claim is going to be hit the hardest. That's going to impact your EMR the hardest. Then it went up to 15,000. Now they put it on a sliding scale. So I have clients where the first $60,000 of their claim is going to hammer their EMR, and that's based on your payroll levels. So it's like a sliding scale of how they weigh your claim and how it impacts your EMR. So there's a lot of factors. I'm sure other states have something similar because there's a lot of different pieces that go into figuring out what comprises your mod.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that when you hire a new employee, you're hiring their entire medical history, but you can't ask questions about that stuff. You're just out of luck if because you can't. There are certain questions you can ask them about the job that they're going to be required to do, like can you lift 40, 50 pounds? Is the hiring? Are there any things that an employer can do on the front end before they make that job offer to a recruit?
I would say, I'll start by saying that most of workers' comp issues and start on the HR hiring front, because you have to have some sort of an agenda. You have to have I keep using the word scope of work, but you have to have a needs analysis, or what your employees have to do, and a way to prove that. So a lot of times you can put together I don't want to call it what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, you can send them to, you can send them to a doctor and have them do like a pre-employment physical, where the doctor is going to evaluate them. A lot of people don't want to do that because, let's face it, the workforce is so shorthanded. You don't want to start whittling away at an already small pool of qualified people. But, if you want to bypass that, this is the risk you're going to run. So you can do I can't think, there's a word for it. I just can't think of it. But you can do a pre-work evaluation on somebody to see if they're able to do the job.
Right. Job descriptions could also play a role.
Job description, there it is. You can do a job description analysis of if they're able to, perform the duties of the job, no matter what they are. If they can't,
I know some of the PEOs that we work with, once the employee is hired by the client company and they're filling out the paperwork for the PEO, there are questionnaires in there on the workers' comp piece that it's about 10 questions that ask them if they've had any claims in the last few years. Do they have this issue or that? Will they be able to do the job? And they do that because it's already after the offer has been made to the employee. It's not it's not a pre-employment question.
Yeah.
And it just lets them know that, this person could, potentially be a risk, and hey, let's maybe not put him or her in a warehouse where they're lifting 80 pounds.
Right. Yeah. So it comes after the employment offer. So you're not really stepping on any issues trying to figure out, you're not getting in any trouble because you can only ask certain questions before the employment, before the offer is made.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
So
this is interesting work that you do. I've actually working with a family office that owns a large lawn maintenance landscape organization in the Southeast, and clearly in lawn maintenance landscaping, there's a lot of the nickel and dime claims. There's a huge amount of turnover. Looking at their claims history, they're partially self-funded or they have a deductible. It's a pretty high deductible, about $300,000 deductible. But only a small portion of their claims exceeded $300,000. So basically, the carrier is kind of off the hook on probably 90% of their claims because they're all under $300,000. I mean, that's obviously an industry that could be very appealing to you guys because of the propensity for claims.
Yep. Yeah. So when you have a high deductible like that, I mean, it really depends on how they're set up and what their processes are. They probably have a process where they take care of the claims below $300,000, which is the highest I've ever seen. Usually we tell our clients, you set a bar, $5,000, $10,000, and you'll cover it out of pocket. When you have a deductible, are you talking deductible on the GL or the workers' comp?
Workers' comp.
It's a big deductible.
Yeah, it is.
So it's essentially they're on the hook to cover everything. It's really I'd like to see who was. I mean, if I was looking at that, I would like to see who's putting the carrier on notice and how those claims that are over 300,000, if they have any, are even affect, or what their mod is, because essentially their mod should be minimal. If nothing should be making it to the carrier. If they're not putting anything.
The mod is less than 1.00. Yeah. The big claims, they have equipment, they have trucks, and yep. They did have a couple of accidents with the equipment, but everything else was pretty much the nickel and dime stuff. Some of them, were $50,000, but a lot of them were under $50,000. But clearly, they have a frequency issue along yep. with turnover. You can imagine in that industry, the turnover is high, but the frequency is surprising. Yeah.
And the frequency, when you start having a lot of workers' comp claims, that will bleed over into other claims. That'll bleed over into or vice versa. You have a car accident, that's an auto claim, and then you have an injured employee, that's a workers' comp claim, and then they rear-ended a mother and her kids, and then they sue the company, that's a GL claim. So everything just kind of folds back into it just snowballs. To the point where it's a huge issue, huge claim.
Yeah. So Brandon, what is your process when you meet with a prospective client? How do you go about it and
so the clients prospective clients. So when I meet somebody that is interested in finding out what we can do for them, I start collecting a little bit of data. And the 3 data points that I collect is I collect their loss runs, I collect their policy deck page for their workers' comp, and I collect their workers' comp experience mod worksheets. And those worksheets are what tell us what the mod is comprised of. It breaks it out by claim. And I'm able to basically tear their EMR apart, claim by claim, dollar by dollar, and I can translate what each claim means in mod EMR percentages, and then I can translate that into what that means for their premium dollars. And then I put together an action plan if there's if there's something there to put an action plan together. I map out what year 1 would look like and where we expect to be in year 1, and then I put a soft plan together for year 2, because it's we may not have a year 2, but the key to know is that if this is done right, my fees, you should get me for free, essentially, because there's got to be enough meat on the bone. So what we feel we can generate in lowered EMR credits should outweigh what we're charging, and we have an 18-month window to do that. A lot of times there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. You can get a lot of cool stuff done in the first 3-4 months, but sometimes it takes longer than that. Sometimes there's you have depositions that are out 3 months, and there's nothing you can do until you have a deposition. So it's really just a function of, there's got to be meat on the bone. And then we do a presentation with them, what we think you should do. The fee is based on the scope of the work. And could range from all kinds of numbers, but the key is that there's got to be the juice has to be worth the squeeze. And if it doesn't make sense, now, okay, we'll tell you that. I mean, I've done these analysis where I'm like, listen, there's nothing. You have one major claim driving everything. I don't think, we've had the conversation where it's like, you may not need to do this right now, but I'll stay in touch with them and they can use me as a soundboard. I mean, people reach out to me all the time that we've presented to, and, hey, this came to my desk or this showed up. Have you guys ever seen this before? And we work the problem with them, and we just do that, to do that. And then, you do good deeds, they come back to you. So,
right. So as we're out there, because, we work with a lot of folks and we're talking about their workers' comp. What are some of the key performance indicators that you look at on the workers' comp side that would, or that we need to look at to see who's a good fit for you?
So high EMR. So they don't have to have all three. I use three bases: high EMR, high reserves, and high claims frequency. They don't have to have all three, because you can have a high EMR with a couple claims. You can have a high EMR with, but as long as their EMR is up there and it's painful for them to where they want to have the conversation, because I don't try to convince anybody they need my help. I mean, I've met with companies that have there's a nonprofit working with, their mod is over a 3.
Oof.
But they're all state funded. It's painful for them, but they just get more money.
Do people really understand what kind of impact that has? I mean, if they're paying $100,000 manual premium and their mod's a 3, they're paying $300,000 in workers' comp.
So they're paying, their mod's a 3, they're paying $3 million, and our success rate averages at about 30%. So we did a whole analysis on their EMR, and we found out that within the low hanging fruit, we could probably knock off $1 million in premium for them within the first year, which would, cover our fee over and over and over and over again. They just couldn't see it. They buy by committee. They couldn't get around, hiring somebody. And the problem is when you go into those rooms sometimes, and we don't mean to do this, but you can go into those rooms and, you present your findings, but you don't realize there's people in the room that their job is to find those things, and you just uncovered all the stuff they didn't find. So then you have people, you have egos in the room that are, well, we may not need them. It's my job. I usually do that. And then, so there's a whole politics dynamic to it that you kind of have to soft land it. There's the difference between straight, you can straight shoot it, but you also have to soft land it, because.
Yeah. That you bring up a good point, because I can speak for myself, but I'm sure Jeff has had the same experiences, that we're in the room with multiple people during our initial meeting. And early on, I never asked this question, but now I make sure that I get everybody's role, understand what they're responsible for. Yeah. Because there's a lot of times we bring in a solution that, just like you said, how come they didn't think of that? Or they may feel that our solution is going to eliminate their position, which in no way, do we set that up for that.
Yeah, and I don't want to do that, but I can tell you when we leave meetings, sometimes I'm like, that person is going to be the problem.
Yeah,
that person is going to be the roadblock, and trying to win that person over. And you just look. Sometimes it doesn't pan out. I mean, we did that one I just spoke about. I've never seen a better case for our services ever. I mean, it was like when we did the analysis, it was like, this is going to be a slam dunk, and it just was hit with resistance, and it's because people felt, I think, threatened, and it was just having a friendly conversation about what we found and where we landed and what we think, we might be able to do. And that's just never materialized.
Right.
Does your organization work with PEOs?
Yes. So we work with PEOs in a couple different ways. I have a couple clients that are in PEOs now. And we just handle the claims. We do all the claims intake for them. We work very well with the PEO. In other cases, I work with PEOs where, you mean like PEOs direct or PEO brokers, or is it
PEO direct? Yeah.
Yeah, or the clients.
Yeah, we work with both. So the PEO direct stuff is more or less, I will say, most of the business I have with PEO directs, they were already with the PEO when we went in.
Correct.
And I had a relationship with them, and they went in. The PEO brokers I work with in a way where sometimes you have clients that can't fit the mold, or they're too risky, or their EMR is too high, reserves are too high. It'll get flipped to me. We'll clean them up. And in some cases, that cleanup period doesn't even need to happen, because in some certain situations, the PEOs have accepted that they've hired a risk manager. They have they have a layout of what the first year is going to look like, and that will, in some cases, I've done it. We did it with one a roofer in New York that we work with. The PEO was comfortable enough, because we were on board handling all the stuff, that they were going to take a chance at taking them on, and it worked out well. So, but yeah, basically, just if PEO brokers have a client that they just can't, they're a mess. The messier the better for me. The more hair on it, the better it is. I've seen that I've like at the mod of a 3. I mean, that's like, to me, that's like music to my ears, because I'm going to have a lot to talk about. I don't like the fact that they're getting murdered by their comp premiums, but it gives me a runway to really focus in and hone in on, where the pain points are.
Right.
What do you guys see in the way of trends? I'm sure each state is different. New York is clearly different than Florida. Ohio is monopolistic. Washington's monopolistic. But from a workers' comp claim perspective, what do you see as a trend in the marketplace? Are claims being more prevalent, more difficult to deal with, or are things lightening up a little bit? I know in Florida they've had a period of about 6 years now where the rates have come down each year, at least on quite a few claims. But then you have the legal aspect of claims management. Are you seeing any trends there?
So I go with the states. So I'll tell you, in New York, what happens is fraud is always prevalent. I mean, I can't tell you how many meetings I go in, and it's been more lately. From what I've seen, is where we'll sit down with somebody and go through the loss runs, and they don't know half the people on the loss run. They've never heard of the name. And it's a function of just people that are on it could be several things. We have one where there was a person that was on the job site. They walked onto the job site and fell and said they were an employee. That's been going on for a year. And there's no way. We've proven everything. We've gone through everything we can figure. We've gone through depositions. We've gone through, and it's still, that person has rights. Once you start saying you're an employee, the laws for workers' comp, at least in New York and New Jersey, are really geared against the employer, and it's on the employer to figure out, like, but they have to prove that they're innocent in a way, but it still costs them money.
Right.
What happened in New York, and another trend that's happening and happened over the last couple of years was, construction guys, when you have a company that their premiums start to go up, they start to break off into different LLCs. And then they have an LLC that does the bidding, one does the payroll, one does the labor, one does the transportation, and they start dividing everything. Well, what the workers' comp board got wise to was that people were doing that. And they started looking at common ownership and addresses, and they were cross-referencing everything, and then they were just combining everybody's EMR into one. So you could have 7 different LLCs, but you all have the same combo ID as far as the workers' comp goes. So I did one. I sent a woman her worksheets the other day for New York, and she said, that's not my company. My company is, so-and-so LLC. And so I went back in to look, because I'm like, maybe I did send her the wrong ones. And I went back in to look, and the company that she says so-and-so LLC is under the same combo ID. So the state combined everything for them. And, we work to separate that. We do it with, a lot of people, where we can separate the mod and then we keep it siloed. And that just comes through picking through paperwork and understanding who's who and who's part of what LLC and why it's not this LLC. And it's just a big project to do. And the other thing is, where people end up on the loss runs is from, a big wrap jobs, OSIP and CSIP jobs, because you'll have a big job where they're building a massive building, and you got plumbers, you got roofers, you got, electrical guys, and there's 150 people on the job site, and the electrical guy uses the roofing guy's ladder to go up on the thing and falls off. Well, everybody's now roped into that lawsuit.
No.
What ends up happening is the electrical guy's labor goes on to the roofing guy's labor, and then it's just nobody. The RAP administrator doesn't really, if you have a good RAP administrator, he'll figure it out. But a lot of times you don't, and then you end up with like I don't know who half these people are,
That's
and then
amazing.
now you're paying for EMR, reserves and credits and surcharges that are not even your employees. So
Unbelievable. Hey, so do you guys do work in California as well?
We do. I personally don't do a ton of work in California. That's more of my partner Alex does some work with construction in California. I had mild experience with certain industries, some trucking companies in California, but that's about it. Nothing really that would be earth shattering.
Yeah, I understand that there's some specific challenges in California with workers' comp. They have some injuries that typically are not considered workers' comp injuries, but they are in California and maybe even some other states. It's not fair to single out just California, but stress, from what I understand, can be a legitimate claim in certain states. Hard to prove or disprove stress as a claim.
Well, that's a tough one because it really is just like, they're getting to the point where anybody can claim anything. And then it turns into just, it's a mess. We could go off into many different directions on that, but it's just a function of, like if you're injured on the job or not, like that's what you have to prove. Were you an employee there or not? Like we just try to get down to brass tacks of, all right, how were they not an employee? And if somebody was an employee and they got injured, what you have to start do from moment one is building a case. You have to start building a defense. And you do that either through a 48-hour protocol. You do that through a return to work program. You do that through, just basically, collecting all the pieces so that when you do end up in deposition, you have all the, pieces you can have together to prove or disprove this person should not be on workers' comp for any longer or shouldn't be on at all.
Hey, do you feel like talking about the early return to work programs and why those are so important? Because, I have some clients that like, we don't have that. There's no way that we can bring them in. But I really learned about it when I was working with some roofers, and they would have some what they felt like were bogus claims, and they'd bring the guys in to cut the count a 5-gallon bucket of nails and put one nail at a time in the other bucket and count them. And after about half the bucket, they were like, okay, I'm better. I can go back to work.
Yep. I had a client that makes people sit in a chair and stare at a wall, or stuff envelopes or whatever. You can send people. You can send people into like charities and stuff envelopes, and you'll pay them to do it.
They feel like they're wasting money by paying them an hourly rate for that, but they don't understand the impact of the employee sitting at home watching TV, possibly watching these attorney commercials that are saying, "Are you injured on the job?"
Yeah.
And
are you between the ages of 3 and 105? Yeah. Like it's like it's one of those commercials. But yeah, they sitting at home, getting them off the couch is the key, and it also helps because you can have one is having the return to work program. The other piece of it is having the job description for that light duty program, whatever you have. Because if they can meet those requirements for a light duty program and they've met those requirements, they can't refuse to do it. They may not meet the requirements for the actual job they were doing, but if they meet the light duty requirements, they have to come back to work. And the language can be in your handbook where if you're injured and you can do the light duty program, you have to do it. Otherwise, you're in violation of company policy. And then you start talking about termination because firing people now is an entire process.
Yeah.
Once you make somebody in violation of company policy, you have cause. And I know they say everything's an at-will state, but even when somebody gets fired, all that goes out the window. It turns into like, it was ridiculous. They fired me because I was injured. But if you have a set of metrics that they didn't hit, you can make the case to get somebody fired. I know a company right now, there's a woman that she comes back from like maternity leave, and she's pregnant again, and this is like her 4th kid, and so she can't get fired for that. But there's now a function of like he's tightening up on her job description. He's tightening up on her. She wants to work 3 days from home. He's telling her she can't do that. He's setting metrics so that she keeps missing these metrics. So he has a case to get her. You have to really have a program for that.
Right.
And it gets dicey when you have, an injury, or you have maternity leave or stuff like that. It gets awful tricky to do that.
So I know you asked me not to throw any curveballs at you, but
Right.
pitchers and catchers are getting ready to report here pretty soon. Let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room these days, if you can, regarding marijuana. You got some of these states that, it's legal, yet workers' comp still follows the federal law and says if you're high on the job, we're not going to cover the claim. I mean, did you get into that at all?
I haven't gotten into that at all. I haven't had any marijuana issues. But I would say, just surface level, it comes down to company policy. Like, you cannot, it's like almost like drinking on the job. Alcohol is legal.
Drugs and alcohol, yeah.
You can't drink on the job. I mean, you can't qualify it as a drug, but it's like you can't take I almost said performance enhancing, but it's not what marijuana does. I would say you can't take something that's going to impair your abilities on the job. I mean, that's you can make the case for alcohol. You can't drink on the job. You can't. And I would change the language. Is you can't do anything that's going to alter your state of mind or impair your abilities on the job. And I would say that includes. I would go through the list of gummies you can buy. The Delta 8 is on there. All the stuff that they say is not, is all legal. I would have that on there. It's the same as like having, no drinking on the job. Alcohol's legal. You can drink it. You're not in violation of federal law by drinking it, but you may be in violation of company policy by consuming it on company time.
Right.
That's an interesting point. But I've also worked with some painting contractors, some electricians, some pool cage installers, and height exposure is a critical metric when companies are evaluating the risk, and they'll go to your website. I've had this happen with painting contractors, et cetera, and there's pictures of these guys on scaffolding, and they're using lift trucks. And when you talk to them about that, oh, no, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, then take it down from your website, because underwriters go to your website. They see your guys on scaffolding. They see you well above 10 feet or 15 feet. And that goes into the equation here as to whether they're going to write you or not, and what the premiums are going to be.
Yeah, so I have a roofer that I was working with in New Jersey, and she told me they don't do torch down. And on their website was the owner of the company with a flamethrower shooting it into the air. And I was like, you have got to remove that picture. They are going to see that. I've had companies that have one guy installed AC units on skyscrapers in the city. It hires a crane in, they do all the work. His insurance policy limits him to 3 stories. His exact response was, I can't afford the premiums if they're the other way. I've been doing this for 30 years. So in his mind, he's never had to deal with the issue. I can't argue with the logic. Like, I can't try to convince him about doom and gloom. So I just gave him my 2 cents and said, look, he's not a good prospect because he's not interested in solving the problem. So you really have to, you say that you take those pictures down. You just said,
but I have argued the case with some of our PEOs on some of these condos that are 5-10 stories on the beach, that they have a crane that's raised in the air. But all the flat roofs have a retaining wall, so the guys aren't going to fall, right? Because they're not hanging off the side, things like that. And so we've had some success with that. However, it requires them to go out there and do a risk survey and make sure that, the buildings are good. And a lot of times these risk managers will go out upon request to make sure a building is safe.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I was on the roof of a building in Key Biscayne last week, and there was no wall. I was 14 stories up on the beach. There was no wall. That's the first building I've been on that doesn't have that wall up there. It was really kind of creepy.
Hey, we were sales guys back in the day over when Brickell was being done, and some of the high rises in Miami. We're walking up 30-story shell buildings,
Yeah.
getting in these little mechanical elevators, and you're feeling the building sway because it doesn't have the walls up, it's just a
it's
shell.
just a frame.
Crazy.
Yeah. I haven't had that experience in New York City, but I've guys I worked with in the past have pictures of them 70, 80 stories up.
Yeah.
And it's literally just like girders and like orange, like that orange netting. And I'm like, nope. I mean, I'm not afraid of heights, but you put me up there, it gets a little.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually, side story, I jumped off the stratosphere in Vegas. So I don't know if you can do that. You can jump off the stratosphere and make it all the way to the ground.
You mean like
bungee or
skydiving or what?
What's that?
Skydiving or what?
No, they attach you to this decelerator thing. I don't mean to go off topic here, guys. I'm sorry, but they attach you to this decelerator thing and you jump off and it decelerates you all the way to the ground. It's 880 feet.
No.
Yeah. So it's just something that, I mean, it's just a funny, like, because I talk about heights and then I'm like, I got up there and the guy strapping me in had a mohawk and I was like, this is the guy I'm entrusting with my life. This is the guy that's going to make sure I'm alive in the next 10 minutes. So
no, that's not something that's going to make my bucket list.
No, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Sorry to sidetrack.
I'm sure. Yeah. No worries.
This has been fascinating to me. There's so much more we could talk about, Billy. I know we like to do these Crossroads Consulting Insight interviews. This is one that we can have a second or third series because there's an element of the large policy, the captives, single parent captives, that I'd like to get into perhaps at a second round. And then there's some other stuff, but
and I saw something on your website about Bitcoin risk management.
Oh yeah,
right. I mean,
that's big.
Yeah, I watched that show on Netflix called Bitcoin.
I haven't watched that yet. So we have a guy on our team who heads that up. His name is Dave. He's a great guy. Dave has been mining Bitcoin since 2014. He's got machines all over the country, so he really speaks that language. And there literally was no risk management program around bit miners. And Dave has been doing this so long. He knows some of the largest players in the market. Yeah. He knows he's on a first name basis with some pretty high profile people you've seen in the news. And he developed Navigator did, but he developed and leads that up, a program around risk management for all these mining sites. And it's just a function of, it's really tricky because the machines, as Bitcoin rises, the machines value rises. And you can't really so we kind of developed, and you'd have to talk to him about this. Again, I'm not the subject matter expert on this, but we've come up with a way, I think, where they can fluctuate the value of the machines with the price of Bitcoin in the insurance policy.
Yeah, we should do that, Billy.
Definitely save that for another topic. Yeah. But it's a very up and coming, fast growing market, and I think that'd be a great segment.
Cryptocurrency is here to stay. It's an internet.
I don't think it'll ever replace the dollar. I mean, we could get into debates left and right, but it'll never replace it. But I think it's now here to stay. I mean, you can buy a house with it now, and it's just it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's like electric vehicles versus gas or diesel.
Yeah.
You can't get rid of the gas and diesel, but you can supplement. So we're seeing that. So well, Brandon, we really appreciate it. Thank you for being
you guys. No, this is great. I'll do as many of these as you want. I love talking about myself.
Well,
if anybody wants to get in touch with you, then they can certainly go to us, and we'll post your contact information as well.
Great.
But you have a very, very unique service, one that adds a great deal of value, especially if a company is looking to sell.
Yeah.
If an owner is looking to exit, all of this stuff comes into the valuation of his company or their company.
Yeah, and I can touch on that real quick if you guys have a minute.
Sure.
So when it comes to there's a lot of consolidation going on and I keep referring back to New York State just because that's the state I have most of the business in. But there's a lot of consolidation in the transportation space, in the home healthcare space, in the construction space. A lot of companies are getting absorbed. A lot of the older guys are getting out. They're selling. And what ends up happening is they go through a whole analysis of what they want, they're going to sell. The other company orders the analysis, and one thing that gets missed all the time is what happens to the EMR when you combine two companies. If you buy a company that's got a 1.8 EMR and yours is a 0.8, that's going to affect things. It may not affect it that year or the year after, but when those claims hit and they fall within that 3-year window look back, it's going to be tacked onto your EMR. And so having an understanding of that. And so I work with a couple guys that they do acquisitions. And when they have a risky acquisition, like 2 construction companies or two busing companies that are coming together, like school bus consolidation in New York State is out of control. I mean, First Student is buying up everybody. They're just going through and just wiping people out. But not understanding like how you could have 87 accidents in one policy. That's going to throw your numbers completely off.
Right.
But what I offer for those people is just an analysis of the EMR for them. It's no cost. I do it. I get the data. I don't even need to speak to the prospect. I can just go through them. I can tell them what I found. And if it makes sense and they feel it's prudent to speak to me, then we can do that. I mean, I do that all the time for people is I do the analysis and I never meet the prospect until the person that introduced me thinks there's something to talk about. So.
Gotcha. We're running into that a lot down here.
Yeah.
A lot of the larger contractors have been doing it a long time. They're wanting out, we're talking to them about an exit strategy and trying to align up some partners for them and help them with that process. So, well, very good, guys. Brandon, once again, thank you so much. Thanks for being part of the Crossroads.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. I look forward to seeing this.
All right. Very good. Have a good one.
You too.